If you were actively playing League anywhere between 2013 to 2017 and you asked a mid laner who were the 5 champions they hated playing against the most, inevitably you'll come across a significant number of them, including Fizz in that list. Fizz was arguably one of the most despised mid laners, or better yet, one of the most despised champions in the entire game during the first half of League's timeline for his ability to functionally invalidate a large portion of champions not just in mid lane, but everywhere else. I would even go so far as to say he was the go-to example of why untargetability is to this day such a frustrating mechanic. His stats were also demonstrative of that too. Fizz was consistently in the upper ranks of mid lane pick rates, typically hovering anywhere between 10 to 15%, which meant any mid laner worth their salt had to be prepared to take him on, especially when you remember back then teams only had 3 bans on each side, and if you weren't first pick you had little say in who got banned, unless of course the first pick player was charitable enough to ask the team for any. But what about after 2017? Well, that's just it. What the hell happened to him after that point? It's hard to fathom how a champion went from a 10, 20, sometimes 30% pick rate down to barely reaching 5% without being significantly over-nerfed. How did Fizz drop off in market share so much despite having more or less the same kit he's always had? Our next episode of Why No One Plays will be talking about the title Trickster, detailing what made him so popular before and why that no longer applies now. Really quick, I want to clear something up. A couple months ago, a YouTuber by the name of Septo published a video talking about Fizz and why no one plays him anymore. I haven't watched it myself, and with all due respect, I don't intend to because I want this video to be purely my thoughts, not influenced by anyone else. That being said, I do recommend you watch this video after you watch mine since I'm sure he has different talking points than I do, which can better illustrate more of the situation with Fizz. Just want to get that out there so I don't get people accusing me of copying him. A concept you don't hear all that much in this game despite how prevalent it is in other games is power creep, the idea that new content introduced functionally or experientially overshadows old content, rendering said old content obsolete and no longer considered by players. In PvP games, you don't really come across conventional power creep all that often for 2 reasons. 1. All new content must be kept in check by the same constraints that govern old content, whereas such a rule does not necessarily apply to games in other genres. 2. All old content must be balanced to keep up with new content to reach as close to equitable capacity for victory for all content involved. Essentially, new champions like Yunara, Mel, Ambessa, and Aurora can't be allowed to do 5 times the damage and be 5 times as tanky as the day 1 champion like Yanni, Master Yi, Teemo, and Zion for the simple reason that it just wouldn't be fair. Old champions have to be given the same opportunity to win the game as new champions. To do that, you have to both buff old champions to keep up with new ones and also prevent new champions from ODing on 200 years. What does this have to do with Fizz though? I said conventional power creep doesn't take place in League, but relative power creep does, and Fizz may be the biggest victim of that. The causality behind Fizz's popularity was how easy of a response he was against a number of mid laners, coupled with the fact that he's easy to play, adaptable to the situation, and that there really wasn't anyone else. More importantly, he was the closest example to an overloaded champion during a time when such a concept wasn't yet popularized. To put it simply, players in 2011 to 2017 saw Fizz the same way players in the modern day see Mel, Ambessa, Bel'Veth and such. He was considered egregiously overloaded back in the day, and at a glance, it's easy to understand why. Both versions of Fizz, the one before he got mid-scoped and the one after, had properties to them that made it feel like he could do literally anything against anyone with very little room for counterplay. For some champions, there was simply no answer to him, making him one of the most effective counterpicks in the game. Few champions have -3 matchups in League where even if you play perfectly against them, you'll still get completely destroyed. -2s are fairly common, like Renekton against Riven or Vex against Yone, but Fizz was a -3 matchup for so many champions back then. Keep in mind we're looking through the lens of like Season 2, 3, and 4, where champions were far simpler than they are now. First, extreme mobility. Fizz had 2 very effective dashes in Urchin Strike and Playful Trickster, giving him the ability to gap close on a target from a far distance or options to escape. These same dash abilities also doubled as a trade combo, so he can dash in on you while tearing you to shreds. Urchin Strike may have been fairly inoffensive, but Playful Trickster was easily in contention for the top 5 most overpowered basic abilities in the game back then. It's 2 dashes, both capable of hopping over walls, the first cast offering Fizz unconditional untargetability for nearly a second before splashing down for a ton of damage and a heavy slow. Few abilities back then had the capability of defending and attacking at the same time, let alone on a basic ability. Fizz could simultaneously dodge your most powerful attack and strike right back at you, and you basically just had to sit there and take it. Any champion who depends on a critical ability either for DPS, crowd control, or setup for the rest of their combo was completely screwed over by this one singular ability, which if you think about it comprises an overwhelming majority of mid laners in League even to this day. Lux needs to land her light binding to guarantee the rest of her kit. Annie needs to land her stun, Malzahar needs to land Q, Xerath his E, Azir's ultimate, Veigar's Cage, so on and so forth. Against Fizz, he could dodge all of that while dealing heavy damage in return. Then there was his burst combo. Being an assassin, Fizz was balanced around having enough damage to blast through a champion's health bar twice over, with the stipulation that if he failed to kill them, even with all that, he would be completely vulnerable for a few seconds. Landing every single part of his kit, including a full power Chum the Waters, was not all that difficult to accomplish, once again given the fact that most mid laners back then were immobile mages. Fizz could toss his ultimate at you with a fairly generous detection radius, perma-slow and amplified damage against you, and even if he had some semblance of peel, again Fizz completely bypassed it with Playful Trickster, all while getting closer to you to nuke you with his Q and W. At the very least, for other on-target ability options, they mostly functioned as stalling tools like Vladimir's Sanguine Pool, but Fizz's Playful Trickster was DPS, gap closing and avoidance all in one. His burst damage was incredible, and all on a slippery champion who was a bitch and a half to actually catch, living up to his moniker of Title Trickster. So what happened between then and now to make him go from public enemy number 1 to a mid laner most people forget even exists? There are several factors behind this, but chief among them is the fact that he went from being the big fish in a small pond to that small pond now being an ocean where he's surrounded by equally big fish or even bigger fish. When you take a look at the competition we have now, there are so many other mid laners who can explode people while covering their bases, either through new abilities or retrofits. Champs like Zoe and Aurora can nuke you 100-0 without even having to get in melee range. Rushdown types like Sylas, Yasuo, Kiana, and Echo can blitz you with the same range of mobility as well. Most integral though, the roster as a whole caught up to Fizz. Irelia, Akali, Diana, and Talon received gameplay adjustments that gave them the same damage output and battle options. Meanwhile, champions who previously would have been destroyed by Fizz garnered more strength elsewhere to make up for a weaker laning phase. It's not just the mid lane. What made Fizz stand out soon became the norm, and more champions began to release with the same overloadedness that once made people think of him as overpowered. Fighter and Duelist champions, classes who already excel at shutting down assassins, are being released who also carry on-target ability, high mobility, or powerful defensive tools that can counteract Fizz. Fiora's W can render Chum the Waters and or Playful Trickster useless. Zed can face tank Fizz's entire burst combo then send it right back at him. Gwen can make herself untargetable to give Fizz a taste of his own medicine, Sylas can trade against Fizz but out-sustain him, Camille can block half of his damage through her passive and then engage and lock him down with her ultimate, preventing him from escaping. Yasuo can dip, dive, duck, dodge, dash around to avoid Playful Trickster splash damage, he can win while Chum the Waters, has built-in burst protection thanks to his shield, and can up a far more consistent DPS. At the same time, classes that Fizz originally was meant to have an easy time against, like mages and marksmen, aren't as helpless as they once were. Kindred's ultimate functionally shuts down all burst damage. Zai's Featherstorm can ironically negate Fizz's critical abilities the same way Playful Trickster negates other champions' critical abilities. Kai'Sa can move around quite effectively, giving her the freedom to avoid Fizz's main attacks, and the shield from Killer Instinct augments her survivability. Samira's Blade Whirl literally shreds Chum the Waters to pieces, completely destroying his most powerful setup tool. Sari has insane combat tempo with ultimate, and if the situation ever turns against her, she can piece the f*** out by riding over a wall. For mages, Fizz can still more or less do his job fairly comfortably against them, so that hasn't really changed, but what did change is the type of mid laners you come across now, and more specifically, what tools they have access to. Take Banshee's Veil for example. For the longest time ever, it used to be a tank item offering health, magic resist and whatnot, so you wouldn't really find them on mages. Now however, it's an AP item, so mages can rush Banshees, and suddenly Fizz can't open up with either ultimate or E for damage, since it'll just get cancelled out. Champions that Fizz used to have no trouble against, like Twisted Fate, Galio, Akali, Victor, and Diana, are now very difficult matchups for him. One would think Fizz can avoid gold card then go on the offensive, but now that TF players routinely buy Rapid Fire Cannon, Fizz straight up loses by way of a bad neutral game, as TF can stand so far away that even if he dodges a gold card, he can't get close enough to actually damage him. Following his rework, Galio is arguably Fizz's most effective counter. Diana, Victor, and Akali have more staying power in fights, meaning after Fizz burns through his all-in combo, he has nothing left while they still have gas in the tank. Moreover, everyone across the board deals more damage. Previously, assassins and burst mages were the only ones who could realistically one-shot a champion 100-0, but now even bruiser champions can tear through you just like that. The sheer amount of damage that champions have gotten over the years, and in response to the sheer amount of ways to deal with damage that champions have gotten over the years, eventually made it so Fizz's kit went from the most horrific thing to come out into something that effectively everyone has. People used to complain about how much mobility he had, considering the fact he came out in 2011 where his only real competition when it came to mobility was Kassadin, old Irelia, Lee Sin, and LeBlanc. Now every champion has that kind of mobility, if not more so. Fizz used to have incredible AP scaling and base damage on his abilities, making his burst damage one of the highest in the game. These days, everyone has 90% AP ratios. Fizz's on-target ability used to be the most overpowered thing you can give to an assassin in the game. Nowadays, it seems like everyone has some kind of ass pull to BS their way out of a sticky situation, whether stealth, shields, on-target ability of their own, healing, damage mitigation, what have you. Everyone can match Fizz in DPS as well as either tank or avoid Fizz's DPS in return. He used to be impossible to catch because hardly anyone had the tempo and mobility to reach him. Now, even a slow, immobile juggernaut can just pop Ghost or get a dead man's plate and catch up to him by walking up to him. Whether by new champions, reworks to old ones, changes to items, implementation of systems, what have you, Fizz's strengths were diminished and his weaknesses became more pronounced. One of the main drawbacks he's always had was poor wave clear, given he has to use Playful Trickster if he wants to push, but that also happens to be his main attacking and defending tool. It was always an issue, but back then most champions had trouble pushing waves, even mages. Now, however, with the changes to minions and the buffs to base damage and AP ratios, you can one-shot caster minions using a single REQ, Echo Q, even a Victor on Evolve D, stuff like that. They only have to use one ability to push a wave, and they can do it much earlier too, before hitting level 9 and before getting their first item. Whereas back then, they would have to commit multiple abilities, if not their entire kit, to push a wave, which gave Fizz an opportunity to attack. Fizz would also get bullied in neutral, exacerbated by status as a melee champion. It wasn't that much of a problem back then when base damage was low, but like I said, champions are power spiking earlier than ever, shortening the time Fizz has to accumulate a snowball before his opponent becomes sufficiently equipped to deal with them. Taking a full trade combo from even a level 5 mage is enough to drop him below half health. Back in 2014-2015, a mage would have to trade against you thrice or more before you had to start respecting them. Another weakness would be the absence of any kind of tank busting in his kit. Once again, in response to there being such a plethora of damage in the game now, champions have also become increasingly tankier. In theory, that should balance out to bring us back to the same situation, but that's assuming everyone benefits equally. Fizz does not. He has no trouble one-shotting a squishy ADC or mid laner, that much hasn't changed, but God forbid he runs into even the slightest bit of magic resist or tank or bruiser on the enemy team. I can't believe I have to say this like it's a bad thing, but lack of either percent health damage or true damage cripples his one-shot potential, which he depends on since unlike other assassins who actually have decent staying power even if their burst combo doesn't kill, Fizz is completely useless until his Q and E come off cooldown. In fact, Riot's been repeatedly lowering the base cooldown of all of his abilities because they realize if they don't give Fizz access to his abilities within seconds after using them, he's gonna die. He's just straight up gonna die. Urchin Strike used to have a cooldown of 10 to 6 seconds, now it's a cooldown of 8 to 6. Seastone Trident used to have a 10-second cooldown, now it's 7 to 3. Playful Trickster used to be 18 to 10 seconds, now it's 16 to 8. They had to do that in order for Fizz to be able to actually fight. Finally, the game has gotten faster, too fast. While it's true assassins enjoy fast games as it means they can snowball quickly and end games quickly, that's only due to modern assassins turning into teamfight destroying monsters in the late game. If you think about it, assassins don't really fall off anymore. Even if everyone is at full build, you still have to respect the enemy Akali, Rengar, Katarina, Evelynn, Shaco, Talon, etc. because they scale so well. Fizz might be one of the few assassins in the game who still falls off like a conventional assassin as a result of there being a hard cap on what his abilities can do and to how many champions it can apply to. The reason games getting faster is bad for him is because he depended on snowballing before enemy champions got their power spikes, which didn't happen until 25 minutes or so. Now you see people joking about how they're full build upon acquiring just one item. Champions are teamfight 1v9 ready as early as 20 minutes, maybe even 15. Fizz is on such a short timer now compared to before where he wasn't on the clock that much. In essence, he got power crept. Not functionally power crept, Fizz still has a positive win rate and like a 2 to 3% pick rate, so objectively speaking he's still viable, but relatively speaking, it just feels like other champions can do more than he can and handle more things. They can adapt to more situations, make more plays, deal with challenging matchups more, and overall seemingly have more agency than Fizz does. He's still able to accomplish what his job expects of him, but now so can a dozen others. Though I don't think anyone is particularly unhappy about Fizz not being as dominant as he used to be. There's a reason people hated him. We have a lot of other champions to hate now, so if it means one less thing to hate, I'll take Fizz being unpopular any day of the week. But what do you guys think about Fizz? Let me know in the comments down below. That's all for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.